Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm Montgomery County Commissioner Judy Dodge, and I'm Vice Chair of the Family and Children's First Council and also Co-Chair of the Income and Stability Work Group. We really appreciate your attendance today. And we're going to start our series. We started our series of panel discussions this morning, had a great conversation with everybody. So you've got tough shoes to fill, guys. But I know you can do it. So before we begin, we're going to have Dave Melon, who is also co-chair with me on this work group, to say a few words. And then Tom Maltzby is going to come up and say a few words. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Commissioner Dodge. I'm Dave Melon, the Regional President with PNC Bank, and I want to also extend my welcome to all of you out there. I am the co-chair with Commissioner Dodge with the Stability Work Group and Income Group. I also chair the United Way Board of Greater Dayton and chair the Human Services Levy Council. And by chairing both of those, it's given me a unique opportunity to see from the partnerships that are continuing to evolve and grow between the county, between the United Way, and our community. This process of working together, I think, is a great example of what sets us apart, and look forward to continue to develop it and grow forward. We're also going to provide you with a little background in terms of the format for this afternoon, in terms of the panel discussion, and to lead us with that, I'll turn it over to Tom Maltzby. Tom?
Thank you, Dave. You all have been welcomed, so I'll welcome you again. I'm Tom Maltzby, President and CEO, United Way of the Greater Dayton Area, and I am absolutely very excited about this opportunity for United Way and the county's Family and Children's First Council to continue our partnership through this strategic planning process. I'm confident we will get some outcomes that will create better opportunities for our community. We began the early portion of this process last summer when we released our shared community needs assessment. And that document is widely used in our community today to help people to galvanize around, what those priorities are that evolve from that. We began the early portion of this process last summer. The strategic planning process will continue through the fall in several phases that will include several large meetings with all of our members, as well as a series of meetings in 3 work groups. Tom Kelly is going to talk to you more about those in just a moment. All these meetings will foster a review and discussion of the results of the panel's discussions, as well as looking at models that may work here, best practice approaches, what other communities may be doing, and through all of that, we will remain committed to integrating the 3 focus areas: education and life skills, income and stability, and health and safety as we go through the process. The overall purpose of the strategic planning process is to emerge with the set of common priorities in our community, early strategies and actions to increase community alignment as we guide service delivery approaches and improve results for individuals, families, and children through a more intentional and collective impact focus. Thank you very much, and now I'll bring Tom Kelly to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to add my thanks for everyone being here this afternoon as well. So we're conducting 5 panel discussions on topics that have been identified from our community needs assessment, as you've heard about this afternoon. What we're looking at is how these topics that rose from the needs assessment really impact our 3 focus areas: life skills and education, income and stability, health and safety, as you've heard. One of the things that we are committed to is really integrating those 3 focus areas. We want to be sure that as we achieve this plan, that we realize that those 3 areas are connected. They are interdependent. They do not stand on their own, and this work will reflect that. Today's purpose is to hear from our panelists as they add context to what the Community Needs Report has told us. They each bring a particular expertise, value, and they will provide us with more information that we can fold into this process. Today, the panel will be facilitated by Marva Cosby, and Marva is going to come to the stage now, and she is going to talk to you about how the format for today will be handled. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so delighted to see you all here. Thank you for giving up some of your time this afternoon to join this discussion. We have decided that this format is going to be about 2 hours. And over that 2-hour period, our panelists will be discussing income, public assistance, housing, and homelessness. With the input from so many sources, we believe that we have successfully whittled down and combined a very long list of questions into 8 that really represent these particular topics. Each panelist will answer the first question, and they'll also answer the last 2 questions. In between, they've got specific questions that we've assigned for each of them to answer. Each panelist will be given up to 4 minutes for their responses. To ensure that we stay on track today, we have 2 very capable timekeepers in the front row. They have this giant time clock that our panelists can see, but we don't anticipate that that's going to be an issue. They've got plenty of time, and we'll take time to have them respond to the questions. Out of respect for the many great human services programs and that we have in the Miami Valley area, we have asked each of the panelists to not use this as an occasion to have a platform or to set an agenda. Okay? We'd like for them just to address the questions that we're asking without regard to their particular area of responsibility in the community. The focus this afternoon is on the thoughtful responses prepared by the panelists. And so while we're very interested in your questions and comments that might come up for you this afternoon, we ask that you capture those questions and comments on the index cards that you were given as you entered the room today. This panel, this format does not allow for direct questions and answers or direct questioning of the panelists. We assure you, however, that all of the index cards that you submit will be reviewed. And if you would like to have a direct response, please just make sure that you put your contact information on the index card. And then as you're leaving this afternoon, deposit the index card into the box that's there for that purpose. As a gentle reminder and out of courtesy to one another, I ask that you silence your cell phones at this time if you haven't already done so. With that, I'd like to introduce our panelists this afternoon. I think you're going to enjoy what you hear from them. Beginning with Deborah Hall, who's nearest to me. Deborah is from Montgomery County Jobs and Family Services. Next, we have Jim McCarthy. Jim is with Miami Valley Fair Housing. As we were preparing for panel discussions, we thought it was extremely important that we include the voice of the consumer. And to that end, we've invited Keith Beal to join us. Keith represents Beal's Janitorial Services. Next is Kathleen Shanahan. Kathleen is with Montgomery County Human Services Planning and Development Department. Tina Patterson, second from the end, is Homeful. And Jennifer Heapy, the Greater Dayton Premier So I think that we are ready to get this show on the road with our first question. Question 1, and this question, again, I'll remind you, it's for all panelists. So we'll just go down the row, beginning with Deborah. The first question is, what income, public assistance, housing, homelessness strategies have the potential to provide the greatest impact across all 3 focus areas: education and life skills, health and safety, income and stability? Deborah?
According to the community needs assessment that was done a year ago, 20% of the Montgomery County residents could not see a doctor due to the cost. Ohio's strategy to expand Medicaid in January of 2014 helped low-wage earners and customers without dependent children or customers who didn't have a disability to obtain access to health insurance. The new eligibility guidelines provided coverage to adults who have no dependent and earn as much as 130% of the federal poverty level. That's a little bit more than $16,000 per year. With access to health care, it's possible that customers could pursue employment and educational opportunities. Additionally, customers who receive services from our County Board of Mental Health and Addiction Services have access to Medicaid due to the expansion. This strategy could allow for dollars to be freed up for other purposes, such as employment services. It will also, or it does also, improve Ohio's criminal justice system and promote safer communities because more people will be receiving the necessary mental health services and fewer people will be cycling in and out of the criminal justice systems.
So I guess this is the one area where it may seem like I am focused on where I work, but I think that we have to have a sustained and intentional focus on desegregation of our communities, combined with an effort to ensure that there is full integration of truly affordable housing throughout our neighborhoods in the Miami Valley. And I think that that will have a huge impact across all 3 focus areas because of the fact that where we live affects so much of who we are. If you stop and you think about it, where we live determines what kind of education our children are going to have, what kinds of professional and social associations we're going to have, what kinds of physical danger that we're going to be exposed to, and what kinds of values and expectations will be open to us, as well as the type of job opportunities that are going to be nearby and available to us and our children. And we have historically struggled with deep divisions of segregation in the Miami Valley, which are still very readily apparent when we look at census maps. So that's my strategy, I think, that would have the largest impact.
I think that from the consumer perspective, and thinking radically on a lot of issues concerning these topics, it looks like to me that many of us live in different areas throughout Montgomery County. But I think it's about pouring into a lot of the disadvantaged areas that could have a great impact. It's not just money, because money is not the answer to all things, but I think it's time. If we took time, those who are successful, those who have businesses, those who are educated, if we took time to do sort of an internship with low-income families and teach them tools, hands-on tools to get them out of poverty situations.
Thanks. So I have 2 strategies. The first really is to increase the supply of and the geographic dispersal of affordable housing, which I think would have a significant impact on all 3 focus areas. Access to affordable housing increases housing stability, which in turn improves education outcomes for children by reducing the mobility of low-income families. It improves health by reducing exposure to environmental hazards and freeing up resources to pay for health expenses and more nutritious food, and it reduces homelessness. The dispersal of affordable housing, as we've already heard Jim talk about, but in addition, it increases access to employment for low-income workers, and it creates better opportunities for children. And studies have consistently shown that expanding affordable housing does not increase crime or negatively impact property values. It will take a multi-tiered approach to increase the supply of affordable housing, and some examples of strategies that have been successful in other communities include establishing a housing partnership equity trust, a social purpose real estate investment trust that provides a ready source of long-term, low-cost capital for affordable multifamily housing. Developing employer-assisted housing, public-private partnerships where companies provide home ownership counseling and financial assistance to employees who purchase or rent homes in communities where they work. A study in Wisconsin found employees living in employer-assisted housing had retention rates 2 to 3 times greater than their average employee and regional retention rates. And we've done this on a smaller scale in this community in the Phoenix project around Good Samaritan Hospital and a little bit around Miami Valley. And finally, along this same line, implementing land use and regulatory policies such as inclusionary or incentive zoning, which either require a number of low and moderate income units to be built along with the development of market rate apartments, or provide incentives for developers to develop a mix of units, and establishing fee reductions or expedited processing for developers of affordable housing. I also wanted to comment briefly on strategies that ensure that low-wage workers access work supports, such as childcare subsidies, health insurance, food assistance, and the Earned Income Tax Credit in particular. This would also positively impact all 3 focus areas. In addition to increasing job retention, thus reducing employer job turnover, research shows that these income supplements provide work, income, education, and health benefits to recipients and their children. And recent research suggests the income from the Earned Income Tax Credits lead to benefits at virtually every stage of life. Ohio does have a tax credit, but it is one of the weakest in the nation. Changes that would make it more effective include making it refundable. All but 4 other states, it is refundable. Making it larger, our rate is below the average of the other states, and eliminating the cap.
Thank you, Kathleen. Tina?
She took my answer. No, and I'm scared she's going to tase me. They told me this is a taser, and I'm going to get it if I go over my time. So good afternoon. I'm Tina Patterson, and thank you. You know, it is hard not to bring the perspective of where you are or where you've been in the community for over 20 years. I've been working with homeless, so it is difficult not to frame the discussion about all of these kind of questions without recognizing first and foremost that I always come from the perspective of what's the best interest of homeless people. So it's been an interesting time to get to this. So. You know, I too believe that one of the very first most important things are increasing affordable housing. We have strategies that we've been working on for about 10 years now, specifically with homeless, about increasing housing for people who are currently experiencing homelessness, and they've been very successful. We have some great outcomes that have recognized that we're reducing homelessness and housing stability for that population. The one piece we recognize is affordable housing. The problem is how do we define affordable housing? Because affordable is just a very generic term that many times we tend to use that, but what's affordable for me isn't necessarily affordable for other populations. So we have to recognize that affordable takes its different term. So first and foremost, I think we have to recognize that there are these different populations, whether they're geographically dispersed or whatever, that recognize that affordable is different for all kinds of people. And I think I was reading a study that basically said that in Dayton and Montgomery County, what is considered affordable housing is basically you have to earn about $47,000, $48,000 a year for a family of a single mom and 2 children. So that's a pretty remarkable thing. So again, and I think Kathleen had some certainly amazing ideas on how we do that. But the other piece that we tend to miss many times with the addition of affordable housing is there is a certain amount of service-enriched housing. Ideas that go along with different than the permanent supportive housing for people with disabilities, but in general, low-income people that need some kind of community services. I like that phrase, and you'll probably hear me use it a couple of different times, that it takes a community to raise a family. And I truly believe that. And I mean services taking into account not just the typical case management services, but how to enrich people's lives, whether that is understanding everything that is available to you in your community, linking you to those kinds of things in a way that is much more nurturing and less of a programmatic kind of approach. Back to that kind of mentality of it really is a community to raise that. So services such as community centers and linkage to activities and really some of those things that we typically don't think of when you think about services. The other, I think, big piece that I believe in as well, and that clock's ticking fast now, is I certainly believe that we have to look at economics as the other big key, increasing employment opportunities by being very creative, whether that's the creation of social enterprises and some different things that I'll probably get a chance to talk about a little further along. So I think 2, to sum it up, 1, affordable housing, and 2, economic opportunities.
Thank you, Tina. And last but certainly not least, Jennifer.
Thank you. I think I'm going to be echoing what has already been stated here, but it is very important for our community. And obviously, I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of the Public Housing Authority. I think you can see across the landscape of Montgomery County the change and the evolution in HUD's policies towards developing affordable housing and public housing. Obviously, we have some larger sites, and then you can see as it goes into the high rises and then moving on to some of the smaller developments. And that's important because what we really need to move towards is a deconcentration of housing, moving away from some of these larger sites with 200-300 units. So within the Housing Authority and coming directly from HUD, there's a push for the deconcentration. And that's an important policy because what you're doing is you're allowing individuals to move into new housing, which will be going out into the suburbs, which means more opportunity, potentially better schools, being around better transportation, not living in a food desert. That's very important so far as on the public housing side. Obviously, we administer what are called vouchers as well. Those vouchers can many times be seen as a golden ticket. And we are diligently working at getting more suburban landlords involved in that program. This is going to lead to income mixing and economic upward mobility for many of our residents, as well as this safe, affordable housing working what I like to think of as a backbone for a family. It provides a family with stability, while the subsidy allows those families to not worry so much about shelling out 65% of their income simply for housing. They can then redirect that income to other necessities such as healthcare, education, and savings.
Well, thank you, panelists. I think you've gotten us off to a great start. So let's move on to the next question, and this one's going to be answered by 3 of our panelists, Keith, Tina, and Jennifer. The question is, family instability impacts the 4 topic areas: income, public assistance, housing, homelessness. How do we improve family stability? We're going to kick this one off with you, Keith.
Thank you. I believe there are several points to improve family stability. They're tossed around in communities and conversations all the time. One is to create jobs. Jobs are a very important piece to the family stability. And I believe that we as a community and organizations, we should be a little more radical in our thought process when we talk about creating jobs. We don't want to just create a job, but we want to create a job that will allow for families to take care of themselves. And 2 would be raise the minimum wage. A family of 2, a single mother with 3 kids cannot survive off of, $8.10 an hour. So we have to really be radical in our thought process in raising that to a wage that's comfortable, that will allow for that family stability. As one of the panelists had spoken already, I believe that increase the earned income credit, so that these are all measures to me that would aid in providing the opportunity to stabilize a family. Quality daycares, making daycares affordable so that mothers and single mothers and families can take their children to a reliable center and feel safe about that. And one of the last things that I have is to reform the criminal justice system and kind of put an end to mass incarceration, which affects the entire world and a lot of the communities that we live in. I think that when men and women come home with no education, with no GED, it's very difficult for them to just live and pay bills on a regular basis. So again, I think we should rally around people and teach them what we know. All of us in this room, I'm sure, understand something about credit and budgeting. That's one of the things that I think we can rally around individuals and teach them what we know and bring them up on a personal level to where we are. So our parents poured into us, so again, we should give back in that way and pour into individuals.
Thank you. Very thoughtful. Tina?
I'm a Googler, so I Googled family instability, define family instability, just to see what would come up, and I was struck by kind of everything that it said. And one of the first things it said is the true cause of family instability is poverty. So, it was an interesting kind of simple way of saying it, and I liken it to when I typically talk about homelessness. I usually say that you combined mental health and addiction disorders with poverty, you get homelessness. And so when I thought about it, I was like, if you combine a single mother, low income with 2 children, with living in poverty, you get family instability. So first and foremost, I think the solutions began as we say a very simple way, which is to increase their economic opportunities. And not to oversimplify that, because I don't have the great picture of exactly how that would mean or what I would do to do that, but I think it starts with livable wages, and making sure that people aren't paying 60 to 70% of what they are earning on their housing, which is combined again to the affordable housing. So I guess if you said how do we reduce family instability, we'll reduce poverty. The other thing is, I think I heard somebody already say is, there are many barriers to to getting yourself outside of poverty. And one is when you get a job and you're already on benefits, and what do you do with those 2 children that need child care assistance? How do we remove or simplify the process that actually encourages a mom with 2 children to go back into the workforce versus it's very hard to take 2 children 2 separate places because there's 2 separate places that take the child care assistance. So we need to remove those barriers and simplify the process that lets the working mom work and have quality child care for the children as she is working. Whether that's a typical first shift, second shift, and to be honest, many people should work the second shift because they're different wages in second and third shifts, but less childcare available. So we see the conflict there. So I think that's one of the first things that I think. I also think the strengthening of the neighborhoods process, whether that's through better jobs, better housing, all of those kinds of things that Jennifer mentioned as well that make neighborhoods strong, are critical to the family instability. One of the other things I think is probably the key piece is real early interventions. And I don't mean just the clinical interventions of a child is presenting something at a hospital or in school. I'm saying we must all, as a collective community, start to recognize the signs and symbols earlier in recognizing that there's a problem. Social services traditionally have waited until they come to us for services. And usually at that point, they're in very much trauma and have lots of issues that take very much longer to overcome. So somehow we have to be able to recognize the earliest possible point of this family is facing a crisis. How do we get to them before the crisis is so much that it caused that kind of instability? So earlier interventions as a community, recognizing that it's not just the school's responsibility or a social worker's responsibility, that it's a community's responsibility to recognize those really early signs of what could be leading to family instability.
Thank you. Terrific responses. Let's move to the next question. Question 3.
Jennifer?
I'm sorry. Oh, Jennifer, I'm so sorry.
That's okay, I'm alone here on the end.
I'm just kind of
sorry.
No, you're fine.
Sorry, Jennifer. I apologize. Jennifer?
Yes. Well, I am an avid NPR listener, and a couple news articles came across just within the last couple weeks that I thought were very interesting. One of the reports dealt with a recent Harvard study that was released just in May of this year. And what was important about this study is it did an analysis of what impact a housing voucher can have in the lives of families. And what was very interesting about this particular research was it showed if a family that was living in a poverty-concentrated area was given a voucher, and this family had young children, and moved into a suburban or less densely poverty area, that the impact on that child was tremendous. This child was much more likely to go to college. On average, they earned over $300,000 more in their lifetime than if they had not gotten that voucher and were able to move to another location. They were less likely to be young parents. And what was really important about it is that it was a generational shift, meaning because you were able to affect that child's life at an early stage, their children and their families then reaped the benefit of that. So I would invite the audience and the other participants to look at that Harvard study. And it was specifically on a Move to Opportunity program that was funded by HUD approximately 10 years ago. Another story just today was they were talking to a gentleman who was able to do an analysis of federal, state, local policies regarding housing, and how those policies, dating all the way back to the 30s, have kind of left us where we are now, so far as the concentration. But I think it's good to understand the history of what got us here so that we have a better understanding of how to deal with some of the struggles and the challenges that we're dealing with now. But to also see that we have opportunities to make those life-changing shifts in individuals' lives.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Question 3. What can we learn from other communities about the most effective ways to assist individuals and families to achieve income, housing stability? We'll kick this one off with Deborah.
Based on some of the research that I viewed, a lot of the strategies revolved around engaging the customer. I think someone mentioned that what poverty looks like for one person doesn't look the same for someone else. I think the first thing we can learn is that we need to educate ourselves about what poverty is and that cycle of poverty. There are a lot of programs that exist now to help people come out of poverty, but they don't always come out of poverty because there are other issues, and I believe someone else mentioned that, those hidden things that we don't necessarily focus on. We also, some of the studies I found, the main thing was to engage the customers. One of the things that we did here in Montgomery County was to establish the one-stop center as an answer to the welfare reform. And I think that utilization, and another study that I studied supported that utilization of a one-stop center that was designed to improve the coordination of the social services for anybody who was seeking work, training, opportunities, or financial assistance, or unemployment, or medical assistance, or other supportive services. And we have that right now at the Job Center. So I think we can take lessons from ourselves with that. Also, we can learn from other communities that the utilization of technology is important. It's important to be able to understand how the services that are provided for low-income families have benefited them in the long run, where they don't get lost in the system. We don't have a unified technology system that tells us that a customer has received benefits from the housing folks or from the social services agency, and that would be helpful to understand. Now, one example, and again, Ohio is doing fairly well with that, is the entrance of the benefit banks. With the benefit banks, customers can access services right there in their neighborhoods. And it's important because depending on the neighborhood, customers may not want to leave to come to another area to apply for benefits. With the benefit banks, they can file taxes and learn about the earned income tax credit and all sorts of benefits that are available to low-income families.
Thank you, Deborah. Mm-hmm. Jim?
Okay, so I agree with a lot of what Deborah says. I do think that we need to rethink the frame with which we look at this. So what is poverty really, and what is affordable? I'll use my own agency as an example. You know, I think it was Jennifer who said $48,000 is a livable wage for one parent, two children household. I'm not in a position as the person who runs my agency to pay a significant number of my staff that kind of money. And so, but I don't think any of my staff, and I know that the way I think about my staff, don't think of those individuals as living in poverty. And I think that there's a big paradigm shift there because a lot of the folks, I tell this story all the time and I've heard a lot of my friends, when I talk about when I was growing up, I say we didn't have much money. But we really weren't poor. right? And so I think that that's a lot for us to think about. The majority of the people that I interact with on a daily basis, if you ask them what their childhood was like, many of them will say, well, I came from not much money. I really didn't have that much money, but we made it work. And I think that there's common grounds that we need to recognize there. As to what we can do as a community, I think that we need to rethink the idea, whereas a community we say, well, we're getting this much, and I'm just going to use ones that I'm familiar with, in-home or CDBG funding this year, so this is what we can do. Because we know that the feds are not going to be giving us enough money, and I think we need to think entrepreneurially about how can we take the big much money that we get from the feds and leverage that money with local assets and private philanthropic money, maybe where there's public-private partnerships, and set our own progressive agenda for the county. I don't think that we have, and I think that's borne out by some of the comments we talked about with the state regulations, a very progressive infrastructure that we're working through that's given to us by state and feds, and I think we need to change that. The other thing is that I think that we need to ensure that individuals and families have an assigned case manager or someone who engages with the clients who are residing or accessing the system to make sure that they have a housing stability plan and that they have it ASAP. I think that the housing stability plan, and this may be happening at Homeful, and I'm not fully aware of it, but I think that there are folks who need a housing stability plan even before they become homeless, and that we need to have resources available to address the barriers that those folks are going to be encountering. I know that we routinely get calls at the Fair Housing Center for people who are facing eviction, and there's no real resource. We have Legal Aid of Western Ohio, but because of their funding restrictions, they're only able to help people, the last I knew anyway, was when they're actually been served with an eviction notice, which honestly at that point is too late. The best that you're going to be able to do at that point is arrange for a graceful exit from the property where they're being evicted. There needs to be support for resources for landlord-tenant interventions that keep people housed. And we need to focus not only on getting people housed, but keeping them housed.
Thanks, Jim. Kathleen?
So income and housing stability are inextricably linked. Income policy is housing policy. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's analysis of worst-case housing needs finds that 80% of the problem is not housing inadequacy or overcrowding, it's affordability. The solution to achieving both income and housing stability is twofold and calls for both increasing the supply and development of affordable housing and for increasing individual households' income so that housing is more affordable. I mentioned earlier the importance of work supports, those public benefits such as food and child care assistance that are essential for increasing low-wage workers' overall income. However, there is a cliff effect that occurs when a slight increase in workers' wages eliminates work supports such as the child care subsidy, in effect pushing the household back into poverty and creating a disincentive to work advancement. Strategies that could lessen this cliff effect include to better taper benefits as earned income increases. That happens some, but if you kept doing it to the point of self-sufficiency so that getting the ability to have an increase at your job does not actually end up costing you money. To increase the income ceiling for eligibility, to stagger the upper limits of income eligibility for various work support so that it's not one big cliff effect at the same time, to reduce the recertification frequency requirements, and to increase the income level for initial eligibility to allow more families to qualify at a different level. For example, with the child care subsidy, the income, you can be at this level to qualify initially. You may have, once you got to that cliff effect, if you lost your job, to get the subsidy again, you have to get a job that's going to take you backwards and start down here. You can't just come back in at a middle point. Some other strategies, there are states like Maryland and Michigan that have enacted state renters credits that provide limited tax credits to renters that are very similar to a homeowner's mortgage interest deduction or a homestead exemption. So that's another way to increase income. In Cincinnati, the Cornerstone Corporation for Shared Equity finances, develops, and manages affordable apartment housing with renter equity. Cornerstone offers financial incentives to stable low-income residents who make timely rent payments, participate in the resident community, and help maintain the properties. In turn, Cornerstone returns some of their turnover and maintenance-related savings to residents in the form of payments in an equity account. The accounts are vested after 5 years, at which point they could be worth up to $4,100. And so long as residents are fulfilling their rent commitments, residents may request loans from Cornerstone's loan fund in order to purchase a large household appliance, such as a washer or dryer, or to cover a financial emergency. Finally, I just wanted to make a pitch for expanding the pool of temporary rental subsidies on a declining scale as a household's income increases to help people leave homelessness and remain stably housed.
Thank you, Kathleen. Wow, there's a lot. You guys have covered a lot. We're about halfway through. We've got a few more questions for you. The next question, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has calculated that a living wage in Montgomery County is $16,723 per year for a single adult and $46,155 per year for a one-parent, two-child family. Approximately 35,643 households, or 26.4% of the households in Montgomery County, earn less than a living wage. How do we help people increase their income so they are earning at least a living wage? And Jim, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Well, it's a big question, and I don't know that I have a really good answer, things that we haven't been talked about before, but I would say that we need to do the stair-stepping with benefits and the loss that Kathleen was just speaking about, and I think that we need to work in a more coordinated fashion to strengthen both our families and neighborhoods, and making sure that those efforts that we do are tied to one another. It's my personal observation that sometimes we go in and we do neighborhood improvement for residents, but without thinking about the residents who are going to be living there. I'll give you an example. So I talked with one of my colleagues. We're doing some work around analysis of impediments for fair housing, and one of the comments was that they had worked very hard to develop affordable housing for people in a neighborhood, and what they learned once the housing came online was just by the nature of what they were doing, the housing that they created really wasn't affordable for the people who were living in the neighborhood. And, you know, I think it was an earnest mistake, but it's also that what is affordable housing is still so far out of reach for the people that we're serving in our area. And so we need to have clear values as a community around what we're going to do with these folks. And that we communicate both the opportunities and expectations to everyone. That's the other thing that I find, is that we tend to only talk to the people who need the services, as opposed to talking to the other professionals in the community, so that they're aware about what the needs are for the folks that we're serving. I think that's a disconnect. And then I think that we can do a better job of fostering collaborations with resident leaders or peer educators. I know in some of the work that we do, I can say the same thing till I'm blue in the face, but if I have one of my clients who's lived it, share in a dialogue with others who are trying to access system, it's more real when they receive it from someone who's also participated. And so I think that peer educators and peer support has a lot of promise, because you can build it into the system, so there's an expectation that people give a certain amount of time back serving as a peer educator once they benefit, and that they, so it comes at less cost. So those are my ideas.
Keith?
I would agree with Jim largely. I also feel that through awareness and education, I can't stress that enough. It's so easy to communicate with people whom you're comfortable. And it is what I think is that, again, being radical in the way we approach the issue of helping people increase their living wages. Many people, especially men and women that are coming from many of the institutions that are in the state of Ohio, they only teach how to get a job, how to fill out an application, how to fill out a resume. But the skills that are needed for everyday life, such as rejection and issues like that, are not even discussed. So we have to be real and radical and teach people the realities. And again, businesses and community leaders and faith-based organizations and mayors and congressmen and politicians, we all have to step up and do a better job of just communicating amongst ourselves, not for ourselves, but for the need of the people. But I really believe that awareness and education, again, I speak back to the point of, for instance, I'll say that some people that I would hire have no clue of credit. So what I'm trying to do is teach them about credit cards and how you obtain that, and the importance of obtaining that credit card for your future and what it's going to bring to you and add value to your life and your family. So I think, again, I'll say as a community, we need to stretch beyond the borders of our suburban homes and where we live and really get to the grassroots of what does people need? What is their need? And how can we help them to become a sustainable family? And I think the motto, each one teach one, is so relevant. You know, just imagine if one person who is successful and understands budgets and responsibilities, if just one person would kind of provide a internship or a mentorship to a single mother, just imagine the possibilities that her children will now have. You know, so I just think that we should, it's education. It's education and it's, you know, hands-on. A lot of the issues that we face today can be solved if we just get hands-on. A lot of times we want to talk about the solution and talk about the solution and talk about the solution, but then we're missing the opportunity to really get our hands dirty, so to speak. So education for me, and each one teach one. It always works.
Thank you. Kathleen?
So I agree that focus really should be on practices that improve job retention and advancement to try to get people toward that living wage. A study by a professor of public policy at Georgetown University evaluated the effectiveness of various workforce development programs and found promising approaches in 3 categories: sectoral training programs, career ladder programs, and incumbent worker programs. A couple of interesting examples. There is the AFSCME 1199C Training and Upgrading Fund, but it's funded through the provision of 1.5% of the gross payroll of participating hospitals, nursing homes, and other providers in Philadelphia. And then it provides training and career ladders for certified nursing assistants and licensed practical nurses. In Wisconsin, they have a regional training partnership that is a nonprofit association of business and unions, which you don't always see in the same partnership, that have agreed, and they're in the fields of manufacturing, healthcare, construction, and hospitality. The firms that join, and they have more than 100 employers participating, agree to develop education and training programs either on-site or at community college, and they provide a payroll contribution to fund it. In return, they receive technical assistance to strengthen technology and workplace practices, improve the skills of incumbent workers, and recruit and train new workers. Two other innovative projects that I found that have been proven successful at raising income are Opportunity Chicago, which targets public housing residents and provides them with an array of services, including transitional jobs, job readiness, contextualized literacy programs, and special skills training in 5 high-demand sectors: energy efficiency, healthcare, hospitality, manufacturing, and technology. And the Roberts Enterprise Development Fund, a venture philanthropy organization with a dual mission to generate job opportunities for people with significant barriers to employment and to generate profit to support other social undertakings. Employees receive training and job experience, initially through a transitional jobs model, and businesses receive capacity building assistance and facilitate greater social enterprise investment. So you can see in all of those models, it's the win-win, the benefit to employers and the benefit to employees. Finally, and this has been mentioned earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning again, we should support an increase in the minimum wage and work to create more opportunities for full rather than part-time employment. The productivity of Ohio workers grew 67% between 1979 and 2013, and at that same time, median wages fell by 1% when adjusted for inflation.
Thank you, Kathleen. Jennifer?
Yes. Well, I'm not an economist, so this is a little bit of a difficult question. But I do think we as a society glorify businesses and profits and have a tendency to vilify the disadvantaged. What it comes down to is effective collaborations between groups for job training, as well as an exchange of policy ideas. Kathleen spoke about this cliff effect and allowing individuals to better themselves while still being able to receive some of the benefits. Those programs are out there. We have a program that does that within the Housing Authority. It's the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. And we allow our residents to bank some money while maintaining the same subsidy amount so that they can then go on and purchase a home or whatever their individual goal was. So those templates are out there and they're important for people. Some of the other things that we've done, we've made policy decisions, some of them very recently. But we challenged ourselves as an agency not to have anyone working at GDPM that could qualify for the program. That's something within our control. And it's within the control of many of the people in this auditorium. We also make a concerted effort when all things are equal. If we have someone who is low income, we hire the individual who is a resident or is considered low income. That's important to us as an agency, and I think it's something that helps the community in the long run. We do the same thing with our bidding and contracting. These are some things that agencies themselves can take on as policies to further the ability for people to earn a living wage and to better themselves.
Thank you.